Right. Um, Long summer break. Glad to be back. Um, really was looking forward to this race. And of course, this is the Dutch GP 2024 Zandvoort. Track I like. It's not the most popular track on the calendar for a lot of people, but I actually like it. It's very different from other tracks. The bankings, the just the undulations. It's a short track, short lap, but a challenging track, very interesting, and it certainly challenges you for car setup. And as a driver, it will also test you quite a bit. Um, Let me start by giving, before I get into the individual results, which are notable in some cases. Um, I was a little underwhelmed by this race. It wasn't very exciting. I'll level with it. Well, for the first race back, it left me a little underwhelmed. Certainly by just almost from the beginning, you could almost predict what was going to happen. And it just didn't. There was some passing, but it was undramatic in a way. It produced some unexpected results and events, but ultimately it wasn't a particularly exciting race. Let's start off with Norris. Great win. 100% congratulations. This is one of those like no question mark type of win, meaning he didn't inherit it. He didn't, it wasn't because somebody broke down. It wasn't because somebody made a mistake. It wasn't, won it outright on pace. And without a question of a doubt, it was a dominant, and I'd say it stamped McLaren's authority. Now, this is not something that should be news to anybody. I mean, McLaren has been on the rise and has been, the fastest car for quite some time now. Mercedes had come up for a while and challenged, and still may do so. But ultimately, McLaren is superior. Red Bull is at best, the third fastest car at this point, notwithstanding this particular result. Because one of the things that I would want to say about Mercedes, and I'm going to skip around a lot in this video. This is going to be probably the shortest video I've done so far. Partially because I just don't think the race was that great. And because I just wanted to encapsulate it quickly and get it over with. Mercedes, I think, will show better at other tracks. I think this was an anomaly, meaning they have been on an uptrend, and there's no reason to think that this wasn't just a bad race for them. And make no mistake, it was a bad race. They did very poorly. The tire wear that they had on the hards was shocking, and that they had to make the second stop was clearly not part of the plan. In fact, it cost Russell a couple of places, which I think was probably a pretty big error on their part as well, because he could have easily finished the race on the hard tire. He didn't need to go back to the soft. And I think they just badly overestimated what pace he could have gotten out of the car. I think they thought giving up those two places on track would have yielded a much better lap time on the softs, and he could have made those places back up and possibly even more places. Not even close. I think Mercedes just did not have the pace this weekend. Hamilton did not have the pace in qualifying, nor did he have the pace in race. In fact, it was eerily reminiscent of, and worryingly reminiscent of, what they were doing in the earlier part of the year, where they seemed to do quite well in practice and then gradually fade as the weekend progressed, meaning they were worse in did well in practice, relatively poorly in qualifying, and then weren't great in the race. So I don't know. We'll see what happens there. But I am confident that they will improve, because I think they had made great strides with the car, and I think on the faster tracks like what coming up next, like Monza, we'll see an improvement from them. But let me not go too far down there. again, back to McLaren, great win from Norris. Well done by the team. Good pit stops, solid strategy. In fact, that was essentially a flawless performance from Norris and the team to get him that win. Not sure what happened with Piastri though. That was a bit of a odd thing because whereas he was clearly fast when the car was in free air and made up a lot of time, he struggled to pass. Whereas Norris, when Verstappen got a better start and got ahead of him, Norris was able to catch and pass Verstappen, and hence one would reasonably assume that Piastri would do the same when he was catching whoever he was happened to be behind at any given time. And he seemed to struggle, so not sure what was going on with him. So he had the pace, but couldn't convert it into a result. A little worrying because that shouldn't have been. He clearly had a fast car, so I don't know what was going on. I'm not sure. Verstappen, I think, again, for a couple of races going now, made the best of the situation that he was facing. His car is clearly not handling to his satisfaction. All of this talk about the brake bias system and all of that. I think there could be some truth to it, but it could also simply be just nonsense, because the reality is, as the other teams have caught up and even passed Red Bull in development, Red Bull will obviously have to be trying different things, trying different setups to get back some advantage, and those setup changes may actually make the car go backward in some instances, or make it that much harder to drive. And so there could be a perfectly reasonable and logical explanation as to why they're not as competitive as they once were, or rather why the car is so hard to drive. It's not necessarily because that system, some brake system, has been removed. It could simply be that because they are behind in the development curve relative to McLaren and Mercedes, that the things that they're trying to get back up on the curve is making the car difficult to drive. We don't know. It could be either one or the other. Not in a position to say which one it is for sure. But give that as it may, they obviously made a very deliberate setup choice in this race, because Verstappen was way down in terms of top speed. I think something ridiculous, like 14 kilometers slower on the straight, which means they must have biased the setup heavily towards downforce. Now that's always a trade-off where you're going to be fast in the lap, through a certain set of corners versus a little speed on the straight. I think they may have erred a little too much on the side of grip and given up a little too much in top speed. Ultimately, would that have made much of a difference? Maybe, but not enough to get first place, because that 20-second margin that Norris had, or a little more than 20 seconds, was, I think, overwhelming. I don't think there's any setup difference that could have been done to the RB20 that would have made up a 20-second gap. I don't see that as being feasible. So I think that the second place essentially is the best that they could have done. I think it's a third place car that Verstappen dragged to second place, but that's all it was gonna get. There's no way he was gonna be challenging Norris in this race. I mean, what Norris did, setting the fastest lap on the last lap on the tires that are old, is telling you that he had a lot of pace in hand, meaning he could have been pushing more. That could have probably easily been a 25 or even a 30-second gap, if we're being honest, right? So there's no way that the Red Bull is going to overcome that gap, no matter who was driving it. So let's just accept that. This race, McLaren had Red Bull beaten. Let's look at Perez. Now, it's easy to say, well, yeah, he did good and he finished up high and all that. But in fact, he didn't. You know why? Because he lost places. He qualified, what did he qualify? 5th or something, and he ended up 6th. So he actually lost a position. Again, it's kind of hard for me to, It's like saying, well, it's faint but damning praise. You know, yes, he finished in the top 10, but he lost a position from his starting position. I don't know. I don't know. I just, that don't impress me. Sorry. Think he needs to go. Still, nothing has changed my mind on that. In fact, more and more, I think I'm convinced. Because if you look at constructors now, you just cannot afford, or Red Bull, I should say, cannot afford to be giving away anything, even a single point in constructors, in the race to the constructors championship. And Perez losing a position from the start is not gonna cut it. McLaren is coming like a freight train, and there's just Red Bull is there's just no chance of them in the constructors if both cars aren't consistently scoring as high as possible, and that's just a fact. And so Perez is just a liability, plain and straight. What would be the surprise of the race for me? I'm gonna talk about now, which is Ferrari. Leclerc and Sainz. Lovely drive. I mean, when you look at almost a polar opposite of what happened with McLaren. I mean, with Mercedes. Ferrari was kind of nowhere in practice. You know, you got the feeling, oh, this is a bad weekend for them and it's another disaster. And then out of nowhere, this drive just came. The car just seemed to come alive on the track on race day. And I saw an interview with Sainz after the race. And that was one of the points he was making, that they have no idea why that happened. They are utterly clueless. They didn't know exactly why they were slow in practice. And they don't know why they were fast in the race. He just said, in fact, what he said was on the opening lap, not of the race, the parade lap coming around to take the grid. He said he could immediately feel that the car felt better and it was just ready to race, and he knew at that point that he was going to have a good race. That's unbelievable considering how the car felt in practice, where they were all complaining that it's going to be crap, and Leclerc was kind of downbeat and like, boy, I'm not expecting much. Just transformation. And it's for both cars, so you have to question. It's not like he had a split setup or anything like that. Both of them, both Ferraris, poor in practice, fantastic in race. So, more power to them. And other than the car doing well, give credit to the drivers. Sainz drove very well and Leclerc drove superbly. He withstood a massive amount of pressure from Piastri, who was in a faster car. Okay, so there's no question that the McLaren was faster. And sustained pressure lap after lap, probably 25, 30 laps. Piastri was on his case. And Leclerc resisted it. A couple of times he came up actually beside him, tried to take him on the outside. He tried him on the inside a couple of times, tried him on the outside a couple of times. So it wasn't like he was like a second or two behind him and just holding the gap. Piastri was on him for a lot of the race. And Leclerc drove masterfully. I mean, he deserved driver of the day in my opinion. He drove spectacularly well, and full credit to him. He actually reminded me of why he's such a good driver in this race. Because sometimes I think he kind of gets a little lost in the clutter because he's not producing great results, and you kind of forget how good Leclerc actually is. And this race showed it. The rest of the field, Russell and Hamilton, again, I touched on Mercedes. They did what they could, but I just don't think the car had any pace today. I don't think the drivers made any big mistakes or anything like that. I think they both drove well, but I just don't think the car was there for them. Hamilton was pretty disappointing in qualifying. He was kind of not really there. Russell did better and eventually finished ahead of him in the race. But the truth of the matter is, neither of them, I think, were happy with what the car was doing. I don't know what went wrong with Mercedes this time around, and I'm hoping it's just a one-off. You can get it wrong. As I said, this track is an unusual track. It has a lot of odd demands on settings, and it definitely it can be tricky to set up. And then the fact that they had all the rain during practice and so on means the time that they had to give them a good dry setup was very limited. So I think that might have contributed to that. They just didn't get the setup right, and it showed in the results. Anything notable? As I said, I'm going to try to keep the short, so I'm not going to go into any exhaustive detail. Gasly, I thought, drove well. It just, who else would I say? Stroll, Alonso were okay. Williams, pretty much nowhere. RB, the Visa Cash App. I didn't get the whole heap of stops. I don't know what was going on with Tsunoda because he was leading Ricardo by a mile. And then I think he had to do a third stop. Why? I don't know. Was there a problem with the car? Who knows? They're not saying at this point. But very disappointing result. Stake with Bottas and Zhu. Nowhere, floating around. Haas. Magnussen was doing his usual, holding up everybody. Hulkenberg didn't do bad, as is his lot. He tends to get the best out of the car, but just didn't have the pace either. Again, this track I don't think would suit a car like the Haas. I think they'll do a little better at Monza, where the speed is higher. So, in general, I'd say, again, nothing really noteworthy. Nothing that I would say was like anything really special. Sargent doing his nonsense in practice. Again, what else is new? Quicker they can get rid of him, the better. I'm sure they're desperate to get Sainz into that seat. Despite Vol's protestation to the contrary that you had confidence in Sargent. They say all of that is down the drain now because he say how quickly he wants Sainz. As I said, generally, not a great race. Great result for Norris. Very happy for that. Very proud of him. I think he deserves it. I think he's a great driver. McLaren, even though I don't necessarily like the principles of the team, I think they're a set up, real assholes. In general, I like McLaren. As I said, it's my Senna team, so you have to give them props for that. And again, Norris, very much a guy that I like and well deserved. Drove spectacularly well, did everything right, did not put a foot wrong. Had the nerve and the balls to put in his fastest lap at the end to show what that's a very Verstappen-like move. And I found the simply lovely at the end kind of funny. I actually found that very humorous. I mean, they're good friends. I know they're kind of poking fun at each other. Or Norris is poking fun at Verstappen. And I think that's cool. I mean, I actually think that's great. So, very good. Very good race from McLaren. I'm looking forward to a serious title fight. It will, however, raise something or remind us about something that I had raised last time, which is with the dominance of McLaren now and the likelihood that Norris will be challenging Verstappen for the Drivers' Championship as the year progresses. How badly will that, position swap with Norris and Piastri in Hungary come back to bite them? I made mention of it that if Norris loses the championship by 7 points or less, how much will Norris, regret giving up that position, and should he sue Stella? I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, on to Monza. Looking forward to it. We'll see what happens at the higher speed tracks.